Welcome everybody to our, let's see, where are we? Thursday, August 5th. Marin Energy Authority Board meeting. First item up to, actually, first thing I want to do is apologize for being late. I was in the city with Sean Marshall and a whole bunch of folks from TURN and other organizations that worked really hard on the No on Prop 16 campaign. Got to see one of our favorite prior public utilities commissioners and a whole bunch of other folks that we know through the business. It was a really good event, and I got stuck in some pretty bad Doyle Drive construction traffic getting back up here, so I apologize for being late. The other thing I would love to do while we call ourselves to order is I just want to read something quite serious from Thomas Friedman that was posted in the Levine Business News, sort of a e-zine that I get routinely. I think it'll help remind us why we're doing the hard work that we do here at the agency. And he writes, this was, I think, posted in late July. When I first heard on Thursday that Senate Democrats were abandoning the effort to pass an energy climate bill that would begin to cap greenhouse gases that cause global warming and promote renewable energy that could diminish our addiction to oil, I remembered something that Joe Romm, the climateprogress.org blogger, once said, quote, "The best thing about improvements in healthcare is that all the climate change deniers are now going to live long enough to see how wrong they were. Alas, so are the rest of us." I could go on and blame Republicans for the fact that not one GOP senator indicated a willingness to vote for a bill that would put the slightest price on carbon. I could blame the Democratic senators who were also waffling. I could blame President Obama for his disappearing act on energy and spending more time reading the polls than changing the polls. I could blame the Chamber of Commerce and the fossil fuel lobby for spending bags of money to subvert this bill. But the truth is, the public, confused and stressed by the last 2 years, never got mobilized to press for this legislation. We will regret it. One thing that came up this evening at the No on 16 sort of celebratory conference was the fact that local governments need to fill in where the state and feds can't. And as we've seen recently with the success in Fairfax and making their policy feelings known to PG&E on smart meters, and our own success in surviving to this day and continuing to do the work that we know is good and right, I just wanted to offer that kind of frame of reference to remind us why we're doing what we do. Appreciate that. Thanks for indulging that. First item up, getting down to business, is public open time. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Good evening. Gene Dyer, Santa Fe. I only have a couple of minor suggestions.
Great.
First has to do with your website. You properly, and I appreciate, do put your rates in the website. But if you look at them, they're a very complicated list, and they don't exactly, title-wise, exactly compare with what I find on my PG&E bill. I think it would be useful to, on your website, have some further discussion of who qualifies for what category and what the categories are, and so on, so people can better understand how you're comparing them, and so on. I have a second comment with respect to your budget item, but I'll reserve that till later.
Great. Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public open time? Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
My name is Ellen Say. Just very briefly, I want to encourage the board to not lose sight of a wonderful opportunity we have here. We have an open playing field I like to refer to as a palette that is totally empty right now. PG&E is sort of not out there in the public eye. They're starting their smart meter campaign, but there's a lot of quiet time right now for us to be able to take over and make Marin Clean Energy be known and be top of mind in everybody's mind. Shortly that window is going to close at some point soon, so I just want to remind us that this is a golden opportunity that we shouldn't overlook.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, we'll move to our director's report. Dawn?
I have quite a few items. Oh, thanks. I have quite a few items this evening, but I'll try to move through them quickly. The first is an office update. I'm really pleased to report that we have moved furniture into the new office, and we've actually spent a few hours working there. We still need to get phones and computers up and running, but that will be taken care of within the coming days and weeks. So we're really pleased that things came together, and we're particularly pleased that we were able to get a lot of our furnishings donated by Bank of Marin, and the office is pretty well outfitted now with free furniture, which is really great. We will be holding an open house on August 20th, starting at 4:30 p.m., and everyone's invited. We'll be sending out a more formal invitation to you all soon, and we'll also be inviting members of the public and the press and anyone else, so feel free to spread the word. And you'll also notice that our meetings will begin to shift over to the Santa Fe Corporate Center. So our committee meetings, technical committee and executive committee, as well as our regular board meetings will begin to be held over there. The next item I wanted to report on is at the direction of the technical committee and actually at the direction of the board out of a special meeting that we held recently. We will be exploring the issue of smart meters. We've been doing some research, and we'll be having some discussion on smart meters at our next technical committee meeting, which will be held on August 16th at the regularly scheduled time of 10 a.m. So we'll be having a discussion at that time on smart meters. I just wanted to let everyone know that all the board members are welcome to attend, and of course the public is as well. The next item I wanted to report on, and Beth is going to add a little color to this, but this is really exciting. Many months ago, before we were up and running and serving customers, we submitted an application to purchase some power from the Western Power Administration, and we were awarded some power from them. This is about 2 megawatts worth of power supply. This would supplement the power that we'll be providing from our contract with Shell, and we'll continue to have access to this power going forward even beyond that contract. So it's really exciting to have kind of a post-Shell period power supply kicking in. It will start to come in the year 2015, and it will result in a savings to our budget of about $400,000 a year. It's 27,000 megawatt hours, and I think what's not only is this exciting because it kind of marks the new the first non-Shell power supply that we will have on our books, but it's also significant in that we received this award. There were 44 applicants for this power supply, and only 20 were awarded power. Of those 20, of the total amount that was available, we received 1/3 of all that was available. So it's really significant and exciting. And do you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, it's called it's the Western Area Power Administration.
WAPA.
Yeah, and so this is, just so you know, this is a preliminary allocation, and so we are going to be submitting a letter, sort of a letter of public comment to this proposed allocation in support of it, and so that's coming up. The two facilities that the hydroelectric power is coming from is one is called the CVP, the Central Valley Project from Central Valley here in California, and then the other one is the Washoe project, and so we will be working with Western once the allocation is formally granted to have a specific product shaped for us that is derived from one or both of those projects.
And one other point on this power is the cost for this power. There will be a cost for it, but it's really the post-cost rate, so it's greatly reduced compared to what power costs in the market today.
And it's all hydro?
It's all hydro, 2 megawatts of hydro.
So it's good, it's not qualified or eligible renewable, right?
No, this will not count as our renewable supply. It will count as greenhouse gas free.
It's great, you guys have already got almost, 1.5% of the power we need after 2015, after our contract expires. Not bad. well done. Not
Yeah.
bad work for the first month of being in operation.
Yeah, and one of the great things about this is it's base load since it's hydroelectric, and so this is a really great contribution to, or will be once it's finalized, a great contribution to our resource mix.
What do you guys attribute our success to? Why did we get awarded, do you think? Is it?
We have an excellent team and wrote an excellent proposal for one. We had our technical team was really looking out for this opportunity and jumped on it as soon as it came about. Beth submitted the proposal and wrote most of it.
Beth, keep in mind, this is being taped, so you've got her on the record.
So we're going to attribute it to our excellent team.
Right
But
on.
it could also be that, that we are a known entity in California as the first CCA that could have some bearing.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The next thing I wanted to report on is that MEA has been recognized by the EPA as one of the nation's leading green power purchasers, and this is really exciting since we've only been up and running for a few months. And Jamie might say a little bit more about this later when she talks about some of our press interface. But I'll just say that, we were one of the top 20. We actually came in at number 13. So that's exciting. Then the next thing we wanted to report on is...
Congrats on that, too.
Yeah,
Well done.
it's very exciting. We have a draft letter of engagement for a firm that's going to be conducting an audit for MEA. We need to engage a firm that's different from the firm that does our day-to-day accounting. And Beth is going to talk just a little bit about this. It comes in at around $9,000, so it's something that I would be able to sign under my authority, but I wanted to let the board know about it and just see if there were any thoughts before going forward.
Yeah, thank you. So the firm is Vavrinic, Trine, Day and Company, and the way the relationship is structured is that our accountant, John Maher, will be able to do a lot of the groundwork, preparing all the documents and bringing everything together for the auditor, which results in a lower cost to us for the audit. The engagement letter has been reviewed by Greg and myself, and John Maher is on vacation this week, but when he returns, he will do an additional review of it. And that's, the letter seems pretty customary.
And this is an audit for our first year and a half, roughly?
Yes.
Good job. That seems really cost-effective. That seems like a good price.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Any directors with comments or direction on this? Okay. Good job.
When's that coming to us?
It needs to be complete by the end of September. The audit needs to be complete by the end of September. And then Beth is going to report on the ERA pre-hearing and schedule.
Yeah, there's a couple of sort of CPUC items. Generally, one that Dawn just mentioned is the electric revenue, energy resource recovery account ERA. This is a PG&E application. This happens regularly, and so this is part of a customary process. We submitted a protest to their application, basically outlining that their projected loads for determining, this is how CRS and PCIA are calculated, that they did not properly account for our phase one customers. Secondarily, that there is insufficient information for us to verify the calculation of PCIA. There's a lot of redacted information in the work papers that they provided to us, and also that the market price benchmark for calculating the PCIA is low. There was recently a pre-hearing conference which I attended, and which provided a good insight into how this is the direction that this docket is going to be going. The calculation of market price benchmark they decided to not include in this proceeding, so we may have to look for a way to proactively address this issue in another docket or prepare an application of our own. And then as it relates to PG&E's accounting of our phase one load, they are actually going to be providing an update to their forecast on September 1st. So that we believe that should address our concerns, and it will also address the concerns of direct access, which face the same considerations that we do. And then we will be following up with internally and providing testimony regarding what information, additional information we need for appropriate tracking of PCIA. And so these are coming up in the next, the testimony will be due on the 20th. And so this is just one docket that we'll be following. Another item of note.
Yeah,
you wanna
the
touch on that as
RPS.
well? Yeah, so there's semi-annual reporting requirements for Renewable Portfolio Standard, RPS. And so we filed our first statement this past week on the 2nd. And there's not much to report there. It's just the first of the customary filings. The main big filing comes in March of every year. So this is sort of a preliminary figures of what we estimate our RPS to be. But obviously we're doing very well.
Are we in compliance with law?
We sure are.
Great, and now I want to turn it over to Jamie to talk about two things, well, more than two things actually, the net energy metering workshop that we held for solar providers and the public, and then also to talk about some other media and communications activities.
Thanks. Well, we held a net energy metering workshop in July, and we had a great turnout. We had over 40 attendees, and they represented at least 10 local solar companies, various other organizations here in Marin. We held it at the corporate center in San Rafael, where our new offices are going to be. And we had a really great question and answer session that went on for a little over an hour. And that workshop was filmed and is available on the web and is also airing now on Marin's local channel 27. So that was really successful, and we're happy that we got to have that workshop. Some other communications related items are that we are beginning web updates to both of our websites to make them more user friendly, easier to access information, to increase our social media, and also to update the information that we have on it. It needs some updating and some purging. One of the other things we're working on related to communications is creating a speakers bureau. So we are identifying speakers with various expertise who can give presentations related to marine clean energy and other projects that we could consider here with the Marin Energy Authority. How many speakers do we have identified? 5. No, we have probably around 5, but that doesn't include staff and board. So,
Oh, that doesn't include the board.
that doesn't include.
So
I mean, you are all on the
cool,
speakers
we're
bureau
cruising.
with your different expertise.
Jamie,
That's 17, if you count the staff and the board.
17.
is our site linked to all of the cities of the constituent members of the?
Actually, yeah, that's another thing we're working on right now. Is some of the cities and towns already have a page with Marin Clean Energy info, and we're currently working with all the cities and towns to get that information updated. A lot of it's older, and also working with the member cities and towns who don't currently have
Great.
an MCE site or a blurb about it. So within the next month or so, or however long it takes each city and town's own team to get that updated, we'll be done.
Okay.
Another thing that we recently had happen was that we sent out a welcome letter to our first phase of customers, and that went out last week, so they've all received that. A few other things are that we're encouraging early deep green signups still, so that's for customers who aren't in the first phase who would like to sign up for the deep green enrollment. And I think that's about it for communications.
Great. And the last comment I'll make related
Dawn,
to, yeah,
Before you move on.
sure.
On the early deep green, I think many people are still under the impression that the wait list, there had to be a wait list. So if members of the board are willing to use their viral emails, and if there's a format, Dawn sent me a format at home I can use last night. I haven't gotten around to doing anything with it yet, but we ought to probably do a blast to say, hey, the wait list is open again, you can subscribe to Early Deep Green, and maybe
That-
we ought to do a little push.
That
So
would be
board
great.
members-
I can send the board a template email tomorrow that you guys can use for that.
That'd be great, thank you.
Great.
Sorry.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, many of the activities that Jamie alluded to, and some of the activities on the consent calendar are related to the recent discussions that we've had in the executive committee about communications. And so you'll see some of that discussion reflected here and in the activities that we'll continue to pursue over the next month or so. And that concludes my report.
Great. Any other board members with questions? Any questions from the audience? Okay, thank you, Don. So the consent calendar is up next, and if there's no real concern to pull anything, I'd accept a motion for approval. Second. Any discussion? Any opposition? Okay, that carries. Item 4 is our quarterly update regarding our fiscal 10-11 budget.
Great, and Beth is going to introduce this item.
Great. So this is just a quarterly update of how we're doing budget-wise. So there's a couple of documents that you have in front of you. One is just our budget versus actual comparison for the first quarter. And you'll see that there's a comparison of these percentages. This was prepared by John Maher. So it's on an accrual basis. And so you'll see certain items, you would expect the last column to read 25%, since we're 25% through the year. We're above in some items and below in others, just because in some cases items hit earlier in the year and that was anticipated. Although there are a couple of modifications, which I will get to second. Just generally for revenue and electricity, this is about what we expected for that line item, because we were obviously rolling in our Phase 1A and Phase 1B customers, not at the very beginning of our fiscal year, but a little bit into it. We have drawn our loans as we anticipated, and actually an update on that is we're already paying them back, and we've already repaid some of the principal on some of them already.
Awesome.
And the next item, we have been doing very well from a staffing perspective, also from the CDA perspective. We are under budget on that because obviously we are now sort of weaned from the county and we'll be moving into our own office space. So that's what that overhead expense relates to. Again, the remaining items were basically on track for what we anticipated, although there are a couple of modifications, which maybe it would be best to touch base on that now. Because of some of the upstart nature of our organization, there's a couple of changes that we would like to make. One of them relates to our office move. We originally anticipated in our budget that we would need a capital outlay for our office equipment, but some of our office equipment is actually going to be leased. So our telephones are going to be through a lease rather than purchased. That worked as a better structure for us. So we will be needing a new line item for office equipment lease to appropriately reflect that. Another item relates to just a shift between staffing and conferences and professional education. That's just, we've been below estimates on staffing and have had a need for an additional allocation towards those conferences and professional education line items. In addition, there's one small administrative change that is to reflect that a $50,000 reserve that we hold in our revenue account for our lender. That's pursuant to our loan agreement. This is just to reflect that on our budget. And then along with this, there's a couple of slight name changes to more accurately reflect how we are are actually using the funds. For example, communications, really, that has been the entirety of our communications budget, not just communication services. And so you'll see those reflected. Donna, are there other items
Yeah,
that you
just, I know that in the black and white copy, it might be hard to see what the changes are. Some of these are showing up in track changes, but if you're looking at the second page that's attached to this item, if you kind of go down the line, there's where it says dues and subscriptions about halfway through. That used to just be subscriptions, so we added dues because that's something that we need to have a place for. And then a couple further down, we just changed miscellaneous services. We took out the word services to make it more comprehensive. And I think you touched on everything else,
Yeah,
Beth.
and so I think that just basically the overall picture is we have we're in line with what our anticipated, you know, we're quite close to what our anticipated revenues are to date from a budgetary standpoint. And also we've been quite aggressive with keeping our operating costs very low. So it's something to be very proud of. So those are the proposed changes.
Do you guys need us to discuss and then take? Okay. I'll just comment that you guys have done a great job managing cash. Way to go. The other thing that Dawn didn't tell us, I assume everybody on the board knows that they, wheedled furniture out of Bank of Marin and saved on moving costs, and these guys have done a tremendous job making
My
sure.
kids helped move chairs to the new space. We were all lifting furniture.
Do you need any help putting up artwork? Because
We might.
I'm really psyched to put those certificates up on the wall for you
Yeah,
guys.
they're there already.
Oh yeah, I'm
They're
big into
displayed.
hanging pictures.
Oh, well, good to know.
And I've actually learned the hard way to create very small impact on walls. Because I move them around so much, I learned how to use very little nails for such. Anyway.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Dawn, have you resolved the issue of the billing of the payments for the two largest customers?
Yes, that issue seems to have been resolved. As of 10 days ago, we did receive those bills, and we were able to get them electronically from PG&E and send them immediately over to MMWD. They were actually facing a time crunch because of their fiscal year, and the delayed billing was causing a problem for them as well. So they were very grateful that we were able to get those over to them. Really within a couple of days after they had identified the problem to us. So at this point, the two large customers have been billed over a week ago, and so that revenue should be flowing in very soon. Yeah.
Yeah, Farhad promised to pay.
Good to hear.
Anything else on this item? Any public comment on this item? Yes, sir. Welcome.
Gene Dyer again. Just a brief comment. I appreciate the budget, and it looks good. I do note that you do have some variables that, because you didn't start on day one, and this isn't a true quarter. On the other hand, I would recognize for your benefit that while most of you are representatives on city councils or board of supervisors, this organization is a dynamic business organization. It's incumbent upon you in your fiduciary responsibilities to stay on top of this, not quarterly, I think, but monthly. And I would like personally to see something like this appear in the consent calendar, if nowhere else, every month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, how
Director?
difficult would that be to accomplish?
We do receive monthly budget updates from Maher Accounting already. That's something we could include. Do you see any constraints with that, Beth?
Yeah, the only time constraint is the way our accrual accounting occurs is on a month-by-month basis, and since our board meetings are at the very beginning of each month, there's not enough time to have the correct accrual numbers. For example, we're basically would always have a month lag, so I can bring those to the board, but it's always going to be sort of a month behind, just because, for example, we need to know all of our billing items in order to determine our accrued revenue, and it's a bit more complicated. So we can't turn on a dime for sort of accrual basis.
That would be fine.
Accounting,
That's
but-
perfectly fine. I'm
Yeah.
left behind.
I'll speak to our accountant about that.
Yeah, and with percentages so that we can really keep an eye on, whether or not anything is, because we do that with our, Barbara and I are on the same fire board, and we get that information from, from our
Sure.
fire authority, and it's real helpful.
Yep.
And that's a great suggestion. Thank you for making that suggestion, because that really, I think we should be doing that. And I think that if we just were able to track those percentages across the year, we would be, as a
Yeah.
board, that much more on top of the finances.
Yeah, and also, I mean, we're also tracking this very closely internally as well, and so.
Of course.
But we're happy to bring that to you.
In addition, I harass them all the time for cash flows. Really paranoid about this stuff. so-
More me bothering Charles. So,
That sounds great. It'll be helpful to get those even a month later. You might have to turn off a cell device.
Anybody know Morse code?
It's actually PG&E transmitting our minutes. Great. Let's see. There's no other public comment on this item. Then if there's nothing further, I'd take a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any opposition? Very good. Thank you. That carries. Good. Next item up is our election of chair, vice chair, and secretary. We have to do this every year now, right?
We do, and actually what our agreement calls for is for this to take place in June of each year, so we're a little bit late, but no harm. So at this point in time, we actually have 3 positions to be filled. 2 already are filled, and that would be the chair and the vice chair. One thing we didn't do last year was we never filled the position of secretary, and that's, again, it's more of a formality than anything else. And the role of the secretary is just, again, to be ultimately accountable and responsible for the record keeping of the board, which is really an executive director responsibility. So for most JPAs, the secretary position is filled by the executive director. So Don and I have discussed this last week, and our suggestion on the secretary position would be that Don, as executive director, would fill that position. With respect to the chair and vice chair, then we would need to go through the procedure tonight of initially selecting the chair for the next year, and then also the vice chair. And then after that, we can go through the process of appointing the secretary. And then the terms will continue until June of next year, of 2011. No term limits here, so again, the officers of the board may serve for an unlimited period of time. They just need to be renewed each year. So.
Greg, didn't we also draft Barbara into serving as our treasurer? And so does that appointment need to be re-upped at this point?
That's interesting. It's a good point. Didn't double check that. No harm in also doing that again tonight. So unless Barbara had any objections, that could be continued. So yeah, that'd be great. So why don't we do that just to also, because that is also an officer position.
Okay, and it's kosher for us to do that even though we didn't notice that?
Well, yeah, that's a good, it is a selection of officers. Let me just, 1 second, just look at the agenda again here. It was specific. Let me take that back. We should actually bring that back at our next meeting.
Okay.
Again, no harm there either if we're going over, so we'll do it that way, so it actually shows on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll appoint these first 3 of the 4 officers
then.
tonight, and then we'll bring the treasurer back next, I guess on October 7th when we next meet, if I'm not mistaken.
Or we could do it on August 20th. We will have
let's
some
just-
action items that day.
That's right, we do. Let's do that.
That'd be fine. Yeah,
If that's okay, yeah.
sure, that'd be good.
So we'll notice that for August 20th.
20th for the workshop and meeting.
And then next year, we'll just do all 4 at
Everything
our
will
June
happen
board
in
meeting.
June. Yeah, we'll make sure that we do that at June next year around.
Good. Directors,
I
any
would
discussion?
nominate the current chair and vice chair to continue serving.
Second.
Any discussion?
You ready to go?
Do we have resumes on these people?
We haven't done that.
It's a risky business, let me tell you.
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say I love doing this, so I'll admit it. Yep. affair of the heart. Yeah, any staff comments? Be careful.
We love you all.
Right answer.
That is a good answer. Any members of the public? Very good. Any opposition? Great. I'm honored and happy to continue. I know Sean is too. So thank you all. Really appreciate that. I love this one.
And I would move
Thank
that
you
we
for your
make Dawn
service.
the secretary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Any public? Any opposition? That carries. Thank you, Dawn, for stepping up.
And thanks to both of you for the time commitment. I know that it's a lot of work to take on this role with a new agency like we are, and it's a lot of heavy lifting, and it's really greatly appreciated.
It's an honor to serve. Really appreciate it. Good, and hopefully we can pin Barbara back down next, or in 2 weeks. Thank you. Great. Next item up then is our resolution endorsing PACE programs.
Great, and Jamie is going to introduce this item.
Thanks. All right, well, the Marin Energy Authority has strongly supported PACE programs, and PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy Finance Programs. And the reason we're bringing this resolution to your board this evening is because of recent events that have been impeding the successful implementation of PACE programs throughout the country. In the spring, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac advised lenders to avoid financing any properties with PACE financing. They also refused to fund mortgages on properties with the PACE financing. And additionally, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, who regulates Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, issued a statement expressing that PACE violates their standard mortgage contracts. And as a result, the majority of PACE programs throughout the country have been put on hold. So as a result of that, the California Attorney General and the County of Sonoma filed suit against Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Housing Finance Agency over their actions blocking the PACE programs. And in your supplemental report, we've included a press release regarding the County of Sonoma's suit, as well as a letter submitted by the County of Marin to Congress expressing support for legislation that would protect PACE programs. And this resolution essentially endorses PACE and expresses our support for it and the continuance of these types of programs despite the statements issued by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the Federal Housing Finance Agency.
Great. Board directors, any questions, comments? Members of the public? Yes, sir.
Gene Dar again. I'm generally in favor of the PACE kind of concept, but I think both you and I are tilting with something on which we don't really know much about. The fact of the matter is that Fannie Mae and others have properly said that you're tilting with their mortgage structure. And if in fact you wave a wand and create new legislation, as you would suggest, what will happen? Probably mortgage rates will increase to compensate for it. So you need to be very careful how you proceed on this matter. I'm not saying to not proceed, but we shouldn't just create legislation which overrides Fannie Mae. We should create a solution somehow. We need to further investigate what that solution should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Bob Spofford, Sustainable San Rafael. Certainly I have high hopes that, maybe something will come of this, but knowing how incredibly slow the government works on anything like this, I would encourage us to be looking at alternatives. I mean, especially the PPA kind of programs like Sunrun, that offer those same kinds of advantages, because we could be sitting here, with some protest on file in Washington 3 years from now and nothing will have happened. And that appeal to people of something that stays with the property, that doesn't involve a big gamble on their part, because solar systems don't pay off in 7 years. The average family does move in 7 years. plus most people just can't write that check anyway. So we should be looking at anything in this arena, like the power purchase kind of thing, that MEA could just sort of be a broker for, or somehow, you know, grease the wheels for that sort of thing happening with the public. It's not a case of our financing it ourselves, but I wouldn't just sit around waiting for something wonderful to happen in Washington, because it ain't gonna probably happen.
Thank you, Bob. You can be happy to hear we're definitely not sitting around waiting. And I think all 6 of us here tonight and our staff are well aware of how hard it is to get anything done in government. And better yet, we are talking about this at our August 20th board retreat. You know, what facsimile of PACE could we conceive of and maybe entertain? So that conversation will be pretty interesting. I'm also living proof of what you said. I put solar on my house in 06 and, sorry, in 04, sold it in 06, and can't really, I think it added value. Certainly enjoyed it for the 2 years, but
Yeah, and
it
then
is a
just,
problem.
just one item from a staff perspective is we're continuing to have conversations with financial institutions and other organizations about these exact structuring issues and how to achieve programs that sort of make everybody happy. And so this is definitely on our radar.
Yes, sir.
Just comments, Beth. When you have a solar lien against the property, an example, let's say it's $30,000, and it's payable over what, 20-year period? 20-year period, okay. It's like real estate taxes. So there's a foreclosure. As long as that lien remains and the payments are made, the lender's no worse off. It's whoever, you know, the point is, what is a requirement that be paid off? Because when the contract is entered into, it's a long-term contract, 20 years, that's the expectation of the lender, and therefore whoever comes into title, which is another lender, for a brief period of time, they hope, as long as they continue to make those monthly payments, which are really equivalent in many respects to the cost of what it would be if you'd had the lights on, and then another buyer comes in and steps in and goes forward, the lender's really not, the lender that put the loan on for the solar is not really harmed. They continue on, and it's not a big hit for anybody. So I just don't understand what the big problem is, frankly.
I'm going to tag on to that, because that exactly correlates with the conversation I had with the assistant county assessor about this very issue. And I would say that the entire community of assessors are baffled for exactly the reason you just raised. His point was, it's like your property tax being in arrears. You bring the property tax up to that annual amount in arrears, and then the rest of those future liabilities go with the property and the next owner. And so it seems, hopefully, that Fannie and Freddie were just being unbelievably paranoid due to a twitchy mortgage market. And as the DOE and members of Congress start to, and the assistant or the various assessors around the United States, communicate how this works just like any other government tax lien on the property, they'll come down off the ledge. And interestingly, Sonoma County is literally suing to save their PACE program, and part of the argument they're making is exactly that.
Yeah.
It's that this is just like any other government lien that gets in front of the bankers, and it's a tiny number,
Right.
and so no one's going to default
Right.
over this issue. And
Right.
I think it's just a horrible time for this kind of controversy to have arisen, because we're in such a bad mortgage market. But once we sort the laundry, there's some sense of optimism with some better communication on this will sort out. On the other hand, Freddie and Fannie are basically saying to everybody, I don't care. Anything, a nickel that gets in front of good mortgage markets is a problem. So, and they've got real power to, hence one of the reasons Marin County raised it to a congressional issue was to try to force that conversation to happen, because DOE and Fannie and Freddie haven't been able to really talk through it well yet.
I have a question about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't there some residual funding then that is held right now, held up? Right, there should be pots of money out there that are not now going to be spent or loaned out for PACE.
Well,
Certainly not in Marin County, that's not an issue. In Sonoma County, that may be an issue. I know that they set aside 100 million, to cover this program, and I think they've loaned out just over 20 million. So there's money that's been set aside, but, I'm sure they have, they're using it in the meantime.
There was a musing today, I'll just say, at a conference we were at. A musing today about, what might become of that residual money that's sitting there and how might that shift, if at all, to help CCAs. I don't know what the nexus might be, but it was an interesting comment.
Greg, did you have something on this?
I was just going to add, the one thing that happened because of what happened with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is that the California First program has been stalled because that program was prepared to go towards validation actions in each of the counties so that there could be then bond issuances for each of the counties that were participating. But now with this statement out of the government now at the federal level, that has stopped until that can be reconciled. So there's a case where there was going to be available bond monies, but those bonds cannot be issued until it can be a validation action, and that's not going to happen until this issue gets resolved.
Evidently, Sonoma's going full speed ahead anyway, hoping that they don't need the Freddie and Fannie underwriting for too many of these. Let's see, this is also a request for action because we have to pass this resolution. Is there any other public comment on this? Any other board comments? If not, I'd take a motion.
Approval of the resolution 2010-6.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Anything further? Any opposition? Great, that passes. Thank you. Good work on that. Board announcements. Any board announcements? I have a couple, so don't be shy. I need to update you guys on a couple things. But anyone else first? Barbara?
It's not so much announcement, but it was something that I just wanted to bring up. And tonight we approved a couple of contracts that have to do with communications and primarily around, I guess, communications and marketing. But as I've been thinking about the MEA and looking at sort of our going forward and what distinguishes us from a regular utility, it seems like it would be important for us to have a market and product strategy, which I think is sort of upfront of actually the communications. I mean, so that, who are we? What is the picture we want people to see when they hear our name? And what are we doing in the market and with our products? So I'd just like to put that out. Maybe it's something we can discuss on the August 20th meeting. But I think it's really important so that when we do the communication and the marketing, it really has a solid theme.
That's a great point. Dawn, does that fit okay in the August 20th list of things we want to cover? Could we touch on
Absolutely.
that? How we do a strategy or a vision,
Yeah.
mission kind of thing without getting too bogged down and executing? Can we hit
Yeah.
that on one of your agenda topics?
I think we can certainly talk about it. I don't think we can develop a strategy
No.
during the meeting, but absolutely there's space for that. Yeah.
Awesome.
We'll make
Good.
sure and
So
work
that'll
that
be-
in.
Good. And Barbara, if you can think between now and the 20th, how to really carefully define exactly what you mean by that, that'll be really helpful.
Can
Awesome.
I tag real quick?
Sure, Director.
To tag on that, good point, and then I would take it down a layer to say, there have been questions in the past about what is MEA's overall marketing strategy, because what we know is we have a number of implementation tools or a list of items that we talked about in the last round, but not necessarily a big picture vision of, sort of who we are and what we want to sell, and sort of this shift now to running a business, which perhaps is what Barbara's getting at, but also a macro marketing strategy. And I think perhaps Rufus has it in his head, or maybe Kiki has it in her head, but it would be interesting to think about if it's worthwhile putting something like that together from which under all of these other things slot in.
Yeah,
Some think it would be a
absolutely.
very valuable thing to do.
Great, we can work on that.
Chair?
Yes, sir. Director.
I wanted to share with the board a rather interesting experience that I had yesterday. I got a phone call from an attorney who works for PG&E, and he wanted me to meet with him and Josh Townsend and one of their smart meter people. And the reason for the meeting was because we had on our agenda the moratorium on smart meters. And we talked about that, although they didn't really address the moratorium much at all. They wanted to, the first thing that, and I'm drawing a complete blank on this attorney's name, but I can provide it if you need it. I have an email from him. The first thing he said to me was, well, so what do we do? I was like, wow, okay. And I said, well, I think the first thing that we need to do is start talking to each other and start listening to each other. And he agreed with that assessment. And then I shifted the conversation to the relationship that PG&E has had with this organization, with MEA, and said, you know, we've had our fight, and it's time for us to start dealing with each other about how we're going to be managing our service area, because we share a service area. And he said, you're absolutely right, we need to do that. And I said, and that includes how we're going to construct our smart grid in our service area. And he agreed with that. So they will be coming to our technical committee meeting to begin that conversation. The other thing that amazed me after we had our conversation, one of the things that I said to him was, I hope that you go back to the office and convince some people that you will hit the brakes on this smart meter program, at least in my town, and that you'll, you know, take the time to have an actual dialogue with us. And so we ended our meeting, and they came back. They were all three at our council meeting, and Josh Townsend came up to me before the meeting started and said, by the way, we got permission from the head office to suspend implementation and deploytation in your town, which floored me. You know, I mean, he did just what I asked him to do. He went back to his office and he got permission to be able to promise that would happen. The entire experience was almost otherworldly because it was so different from any experience that we've had with representatives from PG&E up to this point. And I really sense a sea change coming in terms of the relationship that we're going to have with them. And I think they were practically apologetic, you know, and very aware of the egg that they were wearing on their faces, you know, as a corporation, and are clearly shifting into, at minimum, damage control mode, and at best, restoration of reputation mode, which bodes very well for us. And I think that we've turned a corner, that they've turned a corner. And I'm looking very much forward to working with these particular people, if you can believe it, to sort out the situation that we have not only in Fairfax, but to actually get them to engage with us in the conversation about smart meters and how they're going to operate here, you know, in Marin County in our service area. So it was encouraging. You know, I'm going to be very watchful of being manipulated because they've not, you know, restored my trust at this point. But I wanted to report to you that there seems to be a very major shift taking place, and I think that this agency is going to be much benefited by a different kind of relationship with essentially, you know, our partner in delivering energy in our service area. So I wanted to pass that along.
How long is the moratorium?
A year. And they also, amazingly enough, told me after the meeting that they agreed that this is a political and not a legal issue, and that they would not be challenging our moratorium. So,
Wow.
interesting new times, maybe a new era.
Boy, that'd be wonderful.
I think it underscores what we suspected, after the defeat of Prop 16. We are kind of in a different era at this point, but I think you hit it on the head, Lou. Cautious optimism. Yeah. We've got to remain vigilant.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see, before I take other board matters or announcements, I see some pyrotechnics going on in the back of the room, so I think we better.
Happy birthday to
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lou. Happy birthday to you. Hey.
Did the attorney from PG&E know it was your birthday?
Awesome. Yay! It's great.
I actually posted on my Facebook page today that was my birthday present.
That's a hell of a present. Yeah, may it spread through the whole year of nice behavior. Wow. Congratulations. Other directors? I have a couple updates I want to offer to you. The first is I would also chime in. Thank you, Barbara, for bringing up the notion of really making sure we crystallize what our marketing strategy or vision is, even over the next 6 months. We've got a kind of a list of tactics and projects to do now, but I think that makes some sense. And we'll debate the wisdom of when and how to do that, but I think that's worthwhile. And the timing's perfect for August 20th, so it's good. Let's see, I want to give you an update on behalf of the staffing committee. Let me ask you first, before I go into any of this, Greg, do I need to excuse our staff team to give the board this update?
Just in terms of information, just make it clear that staff has not participated at all within these discussions and what you'll be talking about this evening, but that'll be
Good.
fine.
That's helpful, because actually one of the items may affect our budgeting anyway. So the staffing committee's been meeting. I think we've actually already had 6 meetings, or I guess we will have had 6 meetings by the time we convene for our board retreat on August 20th. And we've been hard at work. We have a suggested staffing plan and organizational structure that we want to present to the board on August 20th if we're ready, and I think we will be. I think we felt pretty close. I was doing some ticking and tying last night using an Excel spreadsheet to create an org chart and some language that the committee will try to finish on Monday the 16th. But hopefully we're close. And basically that gives us sort of a template for the kinds of staffing positions we would tentatively authorize as a board for go-forward purposes. More importantly, that's a way to segue into the formal request for board authorization to go ahead and enter the recruitment process for our executive officer and possibly one other position. The committee has tentatively been thinking about the idea that the board ought to hire both the executive officer and the director of marketing and public affairs. And I can give you all more of the committee's rationale for doing both of those, either in series, so maybe the director of marketing and public affairs would come in next winter or spring, but maybe there's an economy of getting both of those recruitments going now with one headhunting firm yet to be selected. The one thing that worries me a little bit is it looks like our estimated budget for the recruitment may be low. We budgeted $20,000 to do the recruitment, and we got one data point from an executive recruitment firm and another data point from Smart that those things typically range from 40 to 80 grand. That seems high to me. These guys are private sector recruiters. we've done several recruitments for county department heads, and those have come in at the $25,000 mark per position. So one thing we'll have to grapple with a little bit on August 20th is whether we want to authorize going after 2 positions now, and what, if any, economies of scale may result from that. But that's a big variance from our projected budget, and I'm not sure how in the fall we would afford any of that, let alone a variance of 2. The other thing that's come up is in conversations with my CAO and the HR department, it looks like there may be a myriad of staff-like activities that we ought to have done for us, because us volunteer board members kind of working in between the cracks may not be able to get all the detailed staff type things done. And normally our current executive team would do that, but due to Government Code 1090, we can't put them in that position. So we may have to hire some help from HR or from LGS, RGS. And Leslie and I are working on trying to get pinned down HR, what would they do for us and how much would that really cost? And similarly, once we have that kind of task list, then we'll use that to ask the same question of LGS, RGS, because they do that kind of thing for people. And we'll try to figure out who's cheaper and or whether we can wing it as a volunteer committee. But it could add up to a lot of tasks. And one thing that worries me a little bit is, as I mentioned to my colleagues, it's probably, even though we're really starting now, it's still going to take us until February to seat the new executive officer. And these processes just take a long time, as you all know from your city hiring processes. So anyway, that starts to be a critical path item. There are a lot of big strategic and other hiring decisions that the committee so far feels ought to wait behind the selection process for the executive officer. So the update then in sum is we're going to come on August 20th with an org chart and a proposed staffing plan. Part of it quite literally changes some of the names that are in our implementation plan, that we're doing that on purpose for both legal and just experienced reasons, because we have new ideas about where we are and where we may be heading in kind of the short to midterm. But keep in mind that if a new XO comes on board in a few months, he or she could change all those titles back by representing a new staffing plan. So this is sort of the best thinking we have at the moment. We don't have to resolve these budget questions by August, and I'm not sure we'll be ready to, but I just wanted to alert the board that there does seem to be a potential variance, at minimum $5 to $6 grand, and then maybe another piece of money about that size to get the staffing function done for us if LGS, RGS has to charge us for such a thing. And then we have to grapple with this second board hired position if we choose to do that. So we'll talk about all these things, and our committee will work with Greg to kind of pin us down about how we have that conversation. And I guess quite literally on August 20th, we may need to excuse our staff while we grapple with some of these questions. So I'm glad I was able to say this openly in front of Beth in particular, because we do have some budget questions that I'll probably need to work directly with you on, Beth, just to figure out how, if at all, we could grapple with that kind of variance or variances that may impact the budget. Because before we formally ask the board for authorization to commence on spending any of that money, I want to have good answers about how we would fund it if we decide that the board wants to fund it. Okay? So there's the update on that one. On Saturday at 1 p.m. at Jonathan Freeman's house here in San Rafael, Jerry Kay, in my role as a county supervisor, one of the things our contract with Jerry Kay provides is the ability to shoot some video for use on our government channel, and would also be available for any of us to use as part of a speaker bureau effort to teach what Marin Clean Energy is. So we're shooting the entire 60-odd pages of our long version PowerPoint that Dawn and I and Sean and many others, you, Damon, and many of us have been using over that last 6-month burst between December and April to teach what Marin Clean Energy is, and then what you can do is just pare down to the bits and pieces of the video. And so Leslie and I thought that this would be a useful thing for my office to do. Frankly, I'm hoping it will serve to substitute for me during phase 2 and some of these nights and weekends over and over the next 6-month blast when we have to launch phase 2. Now, if what Director Tremaine tells us, if we have a nicer adversary next time around, we may not have to do quite so many, but educating 70,000 people on what Marin Clean Energy is going to be a gigantic task. So anyway, this effort is fully funded. There's no request from MEA at all for this. But if any of you are interested, it's kind of a chance to plant smart people in an audience. We are going to film Q&A so we can teach the entire program. And then if that doesn't work, it's not critical, but if that doesn't work, then later, once we've finished all the post-production on that, that'll be a tool available for people to show. If they don't want to do the whole teaching module by themselves, you can pick and choose pieces that maybe help. So that'll be available sometime in the next month or so. And then the other update I wanted to throw out was that Leslie, again, on my behalf, as the Southern Marin Supervisor, we have an environmental film festival coming up about a week, 10 days from now. It's called the Sausalito Film Festival, but it happens at Fort Baker. And last year's film festival was pretty impressive. They did, the focus last year was on public education, and I think a couple hundred people showed up at every film. So thanks to some fast footwork from Leslie, Marin Clean Energy is a sponsor. I'm kicking in the sponsor money, and we're raising it out, for the most part, outside MEA, although I think Dawn agreed to put $500 into that. So Marin Clean Energy is a major sponsor of the film festival. So we're getting our logo out in front of a couple hundred Southern Marinites and folks from around the county who go to that thing. I don't know how the attendance will be this year, but last year it was quite good. So we're up on the screen in front of the films and stuff. So that'll be happening Friday night, the 13th of August, Saturday and Sunday. And then Leslie wanted to run an idea by us, and we'd love to get your input, your feedback about this, because there's some, no? Well, we don't have a right, but do you want to describe what the concept is? Because there's an additional opportunity, and I frankly, personally, I can't really judge well whether it's worth it. And so I wanted to ask Leslie to just quickly tell us what this is and to see if this is something we think is worthwhile and how much, if anything, we want to put in.
You pretty much gave my whole report, but hello, Chair and board members. The festival last year was the inaugural festival, and they approached us to just as the supervisor's office to sponsor, and they came back to us this year to sponsor again, and PG&E was also knocking at their door. I just kind of elbowed them out of the way and ran with this ball, which is why we are the presenting sponsor for the gala opening night film, and the presenting sponsor on Saturday night. That film is called Climate Refugees, and Charles will be on a panel speaking either before or after, I believe after the film. So I'm going to hand out the brochures. I don't know if you've noticed, if you watch any cable in Marin, if you've got Marin Magazine, you may have seen if you open up Marin Magazine, there is the full page double spread for the festival with our logo. And this is, this is us. And I'm actually really thrilled about this. I think that in so many people's minds, we were this great idea or maybe a crazy idea, but now we've arrived. And PG&E is ubiquitous in their sponsorship of things, and to your point about getting the name out there and having an idea of our brand and who we are and what we look like, I think this is a bit of a shot in the dark. We don't have an organized plan, but I had 2 great interns this summer who were just delightful to work with, and props to them, Sarah Anker, who did our plug, and Chris Martin, who's heading back to the University of St. Andrews, just up the road from my daughter's school. So it's been great. And we also got the attention of the company who did all of the work for the festival, all of the visuals, all their TV commercial, all of this stuff, all the media. And I was cheeky enough to elbow PG&E out of the way, and asked to be a presenting sponsor, and then got the idea that, well, wouldn't it be great if in front of, our logo's going to be in front of the movies, wouldn't it be great to have a 30-second image spot that just runs in tangent with some of these movies that we're sponsoring? So the kids and I put together a 30-second spot, showed it to the promoter, and he liked it. He said, this is great, and showed it to his group, MEA Worldwide in Sausalito, and they've been helping us as well. I wanted to show it to you. We've a rough cut right now, but the concept is really, it's not selling anything, it's not teaching anything, it's just getting our image out there that we're local, that it's about energy, that it's about renewable energy. So I will actually send you that spot. It is a draft to your email, since we can't show it tonight, but it was really good fun to do. And if it's not what we actually use at the festival, it might be a jumping off point to go forward with that kind of image branding, which I think you're exactly right. I think we need to do that. So last year the attendance was really good. Most of the films sold out. They had at least 2,000 people over the 2-day event. We have our logo on all of the 30-second spots, the 50 plus repetitions on cable in the last month. We've got a mention in the press release. We're on the festival website. We're on the poster. We're on site at the festival. We're in the event program guide. Marin Magazine I mentioned, and our logo will be shown on the screen. So this is a predominantly a Marin crowd, but it's also Sonoma and San Francisco. And I would say probably a fairly tuned in group, given that this is basically an environmental focus of this film festival. So I think that getting our name out there is a good thing. I thank Charles for stepping up. I've raised about half of the $5,000 that we need to reach my commitment to the promoter. So I'm looking for the other $2,500, and have talked to a few people and would be happy. What we're doing is giving the money to MCE or MEA as a donation, and then that MEA will pay for the sponsorship privilege. So that is something I'm pretty excited about. The opening night is The Dry Land. It's the Bay Area premiere, and America Ferrera, the actress, Melissa Leo, and Vilmer Valderrama will be there along with the director. The tickets are $100. And then Climate Refugees on Saturday night, tickets are $10 or $12 at the door, and that's at 7:30. And I would invite all of you to come. And it's absolutely the underlining of what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's the human face of what climate change means. And what the effects will be. So I invite all of you to come, and if you would like to write a check, that'd be great as well. And we'll show you on the 20th, we'll show you the spot.
Leslie, do you want to talk about the ask that they made for the video spot at this point, or do you want to?
For the editing, well, the MEA Worldwide was at first willing to do this pro bono, and then realized that they really couldn't do it pro bono because all of the people that worked for them are on contract. So in our meeting yesterday, we kicked around several ideas, and they'd like to help us more, but they really need to pay their contractors, and so they're looking for $750 to $1,000, maybe $1,500, and my intern Chris did such a fabulous job today that I'm kind of thinking we probably don't need to pay them that much, but. I'd like to be able to work with them if I can raise more than the $5,000 for the sponsorship. Any additional funds would go towards polishing this and making it really professional.
Thank you. Greg, is it okay to just get some feedback from board members about all this, or no?
We really shouldn't have any discussion just because it's not on the agenda.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for that update, Leslie. Then that's all I had. That's sort of the fire hose of updates from me. Dawn?
I have one announcement that Jamie reminded me, luckily, that we decided at our last board meeting to cancel the September board meeting because it falls on the Thursday before the Labor Day weekend, and we have a couple of people that will be out. It also happens to be about a week and a half after our big 6-month goal-setting meeting where we will have some action items. So that was a decision that was made at the last board meeting. I just wanted to remind everyone so you can take the night off on September 2nd, which I think it's September 2nd.
So then the next meeting, October 7th, is that likely to be over in the corporate center, big meeting room, or do you think
Yes.
we'll be back here?
Oh. No. Oh.
Okay. Good.
Hopefully thereafter we'll be at the center, corporate center.
Yeah.
Right.
And don't forget, August 20th starts what time? 11 or 12?
11 a.m.
11 a.m., the open house for the new offices with pictures up on the wall, so call me. if you need. Will be at 4:30 that
Yep.
same afternoon. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we will adjourn. Yay!
I can't make that.
Do you have a knife?
Leslie's
Online. Good, yeah, if we could do it 11:30. Yeah, thank you, great. Thank you.